Okay, we're going to discuss planting zones today. The first one that we're going to talk about is the USDA Plant Hardiness Zone Map, and this one gives us basic information on the average winter cold temperatures across the country. And this is so you can determine which plants have the best chance of survival in your area. Now remember, these maps are not guarantees that your plants will survive. Wintertime can vary. They can be a lot colder, a lot wetter, a lot drier. And plants often in cold areas will heave up out of the ground. So there are a lot of different variables, but in general, these maps will help you decide if certain plants will tolerate the cold. Now, the American Horticultural Society has a heat map, and this tells us how many days during the year temperatures reach 86 degrees or more. And this is important to know because above 86 degrees, a few things start to happen to your plants. Okay, so we've learned a little bit about our plant zones, and now we want to learn about microclimates. And you may be wondering what the heck a microclimate is. This is simply an area in your yard or your gardening area that may be warmer or cooler than the immediate surrounding area. A lot of gardeners create microclimates on purpose. That's so they can grow plants that may not otherwise grow in their area. Example of a real simple area would be to put rocks and boulders and things like that in on maybe on the sunny side of your house to create a warmer region, and this would allow plants to grow that might grow a whole zone farther south of you. Now again, this does not always work. It's not a guarantee, but it does help to make some nice little cozy areas for those plants that might not otherwise survive. Another thing is called a frost pocket, and this is pretty much the opposite of the warmer microclimate. I happen to have one in my yard, and there's a low-lying area, and generally frost will collect in these lower-lying areas. In fall frosts, it's the first place that hits is that little lower pocketed area. So plants that I have there I know have to be very cold tolerant, otherwise they're gone with the very first frost. Okay, let's move on to watering. When you plant herbs together in a pot, you are going to want to try to make sure that you have plants with similar water requirements. The reason being is that some herbs definitely can tolerate drier soils and some absolutely cannot. Basil requires a fairly moist soil. Mints prefer a moist soil. Plants like sage and some of the silvery leafed herbs can take much, much drier soil. One thing that you can do that might help is to pay attention to your seedling packages and your plant labels if you've purchased them, and you just even write down what it says about watering, and that will help you to kind of keep track of which plants are going to need more water, which plants are going to need less. And honestly, when you've got them planted in pots, it makes things so much easier. Okay, a few things to look for when you have your herbs growing in pots or in the garden is location. Placement is important. So frequently you can plant your taller plants towards the back, medium-sized plants, and then lower growing plants in the front if you've got it in a garden. And in pots, it's the same way. You just place your taller, sun-loving herbs where they will get the most sunshine and possibly protect and shade other plants during the hottest part of the day. You'll also want to remember that depending on where your herbs are planted and your soil and whether or not they're in pots, some may get a lot taller than others will. And even the same plant growing in two different locations, size-wise, can vary quite a bit. So that's something else to be aware of. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about troubleshooting your potted herbs and something that you probably need to watch for in the soil. A lot of the potting mixes and soil mixes are formulated with quite a bit of peat moss, and actually herbs do not really do well in an excess of peat moss. It throws the pH off, and the plants just can't take in what they need, and they just often don't look healthy. So if you are going to buy soil or a potting mix, that's something that you might want to look for. Make sure that it's not got a large percentage of peat moss in it. And something else that you can do is to mix your own up, and you can actually use a peat blend and add maybe some regular topsoil, some sand, and vermiculite or perlite, which are very lightweight, and they help to loosen and lighten the soil a little bit. You'll still need to feed the plants, especially if you've got them in pots, once in a while, because they can only take what is there as far as nutrients. Now, if you buy potting mix or potting soil, make sure that you really watch out for those super heavy bags, because often they've been rained on and rained into, and they're just icky and they're clumpy, and they just are a mess to try and deal with. You might want to look and see if the pots are actually too small, because many herbs will become root bound, and the roots will circle and circle, and eventually the plant will choke itself to death within the pot. Repotting, or just even pulling the plant out and adding a couple of inches of new soil in that pot, can help to refresh that plant, or dividing the plant. If they've been potted for a while, you may just want to add a little bit of your side dressing compost, and try not to feed them with any kind of a commercial fertilizer too often. It forces the growth, and then your plants lose some of that really good flavor. Okay, let's talk a little bit about watering. It's really surprising to learn that most people really and truly don't know how to water correctly, and it's so important for your plants, potted or in the garden, to get the correct amount of water. Most people say, an inch a week is sufficient, and that, of course, really depends on your location. Obviously, in the desert, if you're trying to grow herbs, that's not going to work. So you kind of have to keep an eye on them. But in general, most people will take the hose, run it over the plants once or twice, and move on to the next plant, and they think that it's okay. And when you water quickly and you don't water deeply, several things happen with your plants. First of all, only the top bit of soil gets any moisture at all, and it doesn't get down to the roots where the plants need it, the deeper roots. So your plant ends up producing very shallow roots, which dry out much quicker. So you're kind of creating a compound problem. So you need to water, and what I do is what I call the watering countdown, and it's just really silly, but I count, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, and I stand there and I will water and hold the water on the plant and then move to the next one, and I go back and do them all over again. And if I've got a larger plant, it's going to need more water, so you may have to go back 2 or 3 times. Soaker hoses are real simple to set up if you have a garden situation. That's easy. There are plant self-watering pots for your plants, planters, and other situations, other things that you can look for in garden catalogs for watering if watering's not your best thing. But anyway, remember that watering a little bit a day is not very good for your plants, and if you are in windy and dry conditions, they will need to be watered more often. And in order to check to make sure they are getting enough, poke them. Just poke your finger down in the soil and go down an inch or so, and if the soil is dry or not moist, give them a good drink, and they will reward you by being happy and productive.